welcome to another Kids at Home conversation from Kids at Heart International. Today we'll be focusing on a topic that some of us find a little uncomfortable. It's how God can use the spiritual practice of stewardship to transform us and the children that we love. So today's conversation is called Giving Back to God, and I'm Gordon West.
And I'm Adam Ormord.
And we are delighted to welcome today our very special guest, very special friend, Asia Carr-Favors, to join us in this conversation. Asia is an attorney. Yes, hello, Asia. Asia is an attorney for a large denomination, and she pretty much single-handedly runs the state of Illinois and much of the Midwest, I hear, Asia, yeah. So she's also our newest Kids at Heart board member, and it's just such a delight. She recently was appointed to the Medical Disciplinary Board for the state of Illinois, and she has a delightful 5-year-old kindergartner that she is now getting to teach at home. I guess it's not really homeschooling when your child is just at home learning, but having seen her discipline her 5-year-old, we know she's ready for the medical people on that disciplinary board, so she's all set. But welcome, Asia, and for all those balls you have spinning in the air, we're so thankful that, or plates spinning, I guess, that you're with us this morning. We hope you're doing well in your home in Chicago.
Thank you, Gordon. Adam, it's good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. We had you on an earlier conversation with several other panelists, and that's one of the most viewed Kids at Home conversations we've had to date. And we're really excited to have you back for this great conversation. So I just want to begin by, as we talk about giving back to God, we want to think back to our own early memories, as if we can remember back in the days of our own childhood, some type of a memory about sharing something with someone else, Asia, that was like a joy for you to be able to share. Do you have a story about the joy of sharing?
I do, Adam, and I'm kind of old, so it was hard for me to reach back to my youth, but I recall the story of my son. He was tiny, he just learned to walk, and my good friend Michael Washington was having, his family was having folks over in their home, and we were eating. And it was my son, who he probably was barely 2 at the time. It was his first time meeting a little boy who's the son of a friend of ours. And my son had a toy. It was one of those things where you squeeze it and the head lights up and the body lights up. And he was serious about it. Like, we can't leave home without this toy. Like, it is serious business. If this toy came up missing, like, you would have to figure out how to get another one. It was that serious. And I remember him walking up to the kid who was about his age, and he literally just handed it to him. And I was floored because I knew what the toy sort of meant to him. And I think in that moment, sort of watching that and seeing his face, I think what he meant to say, if he could talk, was probably, I love this so much, I think you'll love it too. And in that moment, I kind of thought about, what if we could all give so wholeheartedly, like from such an innocent, from such a warm place. And it really meant a lot to me. And that's the reason I still remember it.
Well, and I haven't known you for a whole long time, but boy, what I've seen from your life, you just exemplified the theory that we have at Kids at Heart, that kids get that from somewhere. We do know that God has implanted some wonderful things in every human being, and children show those, but they also have seen it from a mom who is very generous with her time and talents and good nature. So
that means a lot, Gordon. Thank you.
Well, they don't hear what we say, but they sure hear what we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They hear volumes in what we do. And so that doesn't surprise me that your little boy has learned that so well and sharing the best. And I know a busy lawyer and mom and everything, for you to even share your time with us today is an example of that. We so appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Asia, when we talk about this idea of stewardship, first thing that comes to mind would be all the resources that are on bookshelves, you know, in terms of financial stewardship in churches and giving and tithing and, you know, Dave Ramsey and a number of
Sure.
other type ministries. So,
And Adam, as you say that, don't you, my gut just starts filling with either guilt or pushing back. It's like a lot of them are like, stewardship is you ought to be doing something, or let me share with you about stewardship so that you can give to me, you know, or give to our cause. So, and that's not fair, but I think the field is full of those feelings and those emotions. But we want to dispel that today.
Yeah, we really want to take this to a level of talking about stewardship as a Christian practice for spiritual formation. And it's not just this idea of being good budgeters, or, you know, how did God help you understand, Asia, just in your own life, that everything you have, your money, even raising your child, everything you have is on loan from God to be used to express your love for God?
For me, I think it was really just realizing and accepting the goodness of God. Because the goodness of God manifests itself in my life so many different ways. And having gotten what I prayed for at times and having not gotten it, and then later seeing why I didn't get it, and all of those things, but in particular, praying for something and receiving it made me realize it didn't belong to me. And I think the reason for that is if you pray for something and God delivers it, like for instance, at one point in time, I was unemployed, and so you pray for a job, right? And if you get a job, then your mind immediately goes to, okay, I got what I asked for. What do I do with it? Right? And I think that question has to be directed back to the God that gave it to you. And so when you think about what do I do with it, and you're directing that question back to God, I think humility takes you to a place where you recognize it doesn't belong to me anyway. I couldn't deliver it, right? For those of us who, you know, are seeking things from God that we couldn't do on our own, right? When it happens, or when he gives us peace and it still didn't happen, right? You can't deliver yourself that thing, or you can't deliver yourself that peace on your own. And so you have to recognize it doesn't belong to me anyway. I got it. It's not mine. So I couldn't come up with it if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Gordon, what do you think? Do you remember when that shift happened, that conversion happened in your mind?
I think for me, it's certainly been a process. I did not grow up in a Christian family, and so even at a very young age, I became a Christian in high school. And as I learned about tithing, there were a lot of rules and expectations, and so I saw it as something good to do. But it took years to recognize that it was something to do in relationship with God. And certainly as that I went on, and you know, it's easy for us even in full-time ministry to not know that we're still doing things for some other purpose rather than giving back from our day that God gave us as here is just, I'm just giving back to you, God, whatever you want of me today, whatever that might be. So it's just really been a long, slow process. But it's interesting that Asia mentions a time she didn't have a job, because I think the times that I probably took the biggest steps forward were when it hit at critical times, at periods of loss, at times when, you know, for me personally, the more things I have going on, the more plans I have, the more money I have, the more opportunities I have, the more I want to hold on to all of these, me. And sometimes it takes losing things to recognize the value of them and where they came from in the first place, or losing the job, or losing the relationship, or, you know, I'll tell you what, to be quite practical, right now I'm engaged to be remarried, and having lost a wonderful wife to cancer, there is something different I have noticed in me about honoring the next wife and recognizing the gift from God, and how our marriage my marriage to Becky was given back to God, but it just seems even that much more of a calling now that God has something special in store, and He's giving me this time, this relationship for a purpose. So pay attention to what that gift back to Him would be.
Yeah,
I think that's an important point, Gordon, that sometimes you have to recognize first that it's a gift.
Yes. Because if it didn't come from God, then the stewardship concept kind of goes out the window. But when we step back and realize everything comes from God, yes, that makes a huge difference. Oh, well, okay, God. And we go to any of the parables about, so we're being stewards. It is not mine. So what am I being asked to do with it? What is the thing expected of me or requested of me? And how do I honor the owner of my minutes, my days, my body, my money, whatever it may be?
yeah. One of the songs I've been listening to a lot lately, and the timing of when we're recording this, we'll go ahead and date this recording, is it's the Friday prior to Thanksgiving of 2020. So this actually will come out after Thanksgiving. It'll be sometime in December when this will be out on our website and YouTube. But song I've been listening to a lot lately, the bridge just says, "Life is a gift and the giver is good." And it just keeps repeating that phrase over and over.
Wow.
And when I stop myself and let that sink in and soak in, it moves me. And it's no coincidence that as we're heading into a Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S., and we're talking about, wow, God is good. And even in the midst of some of the hardest, challenging times that we have faced, I mean, even as we're talking to you, Asia, you're telling us as we got on the recording that you were in the middle of actually being your child's teacher, right? Sitting during preschool or kindergarten, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, our lives have been disrupted. Some of us had some things that we don't have anymore. We don't have the freedom to travel like we used to. Some of us don't have jobs. Some of us have lost loved ones, and yet in this time we're coming back to recognizing and returning to this idea that life is a gift, that God is good, and everything we have comes from Him, and great is His faithfulness, in our lives. And to just remind ourselves of that. I love what you said, Gordon, that even viewing our days from a stewardship model, our minutes, our hours, that our opportunities to give back to God in the moment of frustration. You know what, God, even this moment is a gift, and I want to give this back to you.
Wow.
There's a wonderful poem that was emailed to me this very morning, talking about maybe if during this pandemic, maybe if we shifted our focus from what we don't have, what we lost, to what we do have, and asking God, so what do you have for me in this time that I get to sit next to my 5-year-old on a bench and try to be a lawyer and a kindergarten teacher all at the same time? What do you have for me, God? What is in this? What are the blessings of this, and how can I use them for your glory?
I think these are such important questions, Gordon. What do you have for me? And as Adam just reiterated, even asking God about your days, what do I give back to you today? What is this day about? But I think we could log off now, because I think Adam just summed it up. He said, life is a gift. God is good. Everything comes from Him.
And doesn't it feel good to receive that and say, well, maybe I could be a good giver too.
Wow.
Maybe I could make someone feel as good as I feel when God gives me this. Well, it's those kinds of daily things and those pieces that the Spirit of God can use. As we said, when you say that in front of your 5-year-old, that the Spirit of God can use that to nurture our relationship with God, but it's also what we want for our children, and our desires to help children fall deeply in love with Jesus, including in this area of stewardship. So Asia, when you're going to try to explain and define stewardship to your son or to another child, what would you say? What are some child-friendly language ideas that you would use?
So I asked my son if I could borrow these. And you will see it is not fancy. These are mason jars. The top is out. He has 3 of them. And we just took a marker. And on one we wrote spend. On one we wrote save. On one we wrote give. And this is the gift jar.
Wow.
Yeah, and so these are singles. He's not rich, Gordon. These are just dollar bill dogs.
Still impressive.
But what he does is when he gets money, because sometimes grandparents, they're a little over the top, right? Or he gets money for his birthday. We talk about where it should go. And a couple times a year, we take the gift jar and he decides, okay, I'm going to give this to his favorite cause, of course, is the local zoo, which is run on donations. But what he also does is when we could go to church, he would take money out of this jar because he knows when I'm preparing, for instance, my envelope, he gets to participate and he gets to prepare his envelope. And so in our household, this was one way I wanted to make it visual for him. Another way in terms of sort of wrapping language around it, I think, Gordon, I think you said it best at the onset. It's they heard what you said, but they're going to do what you do. And so I like to, at the end of the year, we gather up things. And I like to take my things. So I'll show him, here's a bag of my things that we're giving away, right? Or we'll sit down and I'll say, okay, I have this amount of money in front of me right now. This is what I'm going to give. And so I think for him, the language is more body language, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
So that he can see it and understand it and get it while he's younger. So that when he's older, this jar, which then becomes a bank account, makes more sense for him.
Well, and when you give and you give with that smile on your face, that's that lesson that you can't put into a brain. You can only put it into a heart, where he says, "Oh, mom seems to enjoy doing this. She feels purposeful, or something good happens in mom when she's doing this. Well, then it must be a good thing." And
Sure.
we start building those pieces. Adam, what about you? How do you define it? How did you define it to your children? You have a grandchild now coming along. How would you define it to her as she continues growing?
That's a good question. She's a little
tiny.
over one.
Yeah.
1 year old.
I'm just getting you ready, though.
Yeah. I love what you said about your body language and your smile and your joy, to allow my children or my grandchildren now to get caught up in the joy of the overflowing love of being able to receive love from God and recognize that, everything that we have, we're thankful for, and to be able to give it back or to return it to God with an open hand. Generosity is something that matters to me, and I wanted my children always to pick up on that. But the idea of stewardship, I just would try to help them understand, not just in terms of even money, but just all the types of resources that we have, to be aware that you might have this and other folks don't. You might have this surplus that you think of water, for example, and I want you to understand there are places where they lack this very resource that we have in abundance. And so to even think about how to not just use everything that you have and consume everything you have, but be thoughtful about everything that you have been given, and be aware of those who have not been given these things, was something I tried to help my children realize at a young age. It seemed like it always had to do with how long their showers took, but that's,
Yeah. And not just being thoughtful, right, Adam, which is very, very important, but to take care of it.
Yeah.
Right. To look after it.
Mm-hmm.
And in looking after it, it becomes a tool that you can give away later.
Right.
And not just, so with my son, and he's small and he has grandparents, I have to remind him a lot that, okay, you have more toys than you need. And especially now when we're approaching, Christmas. So you have to show me that you're going to put these away, that you're going to be neat, that you're going to care for them, that you're going to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. end of the year, the ones that you don't play with, you're going to put them in a bag and we're going to take them and we're going to give them away. But not just being thoughtful about it, but also taking care of it.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, that's what our resource guide would say.
Yes.
Our definition just says that stewardship is the care and the management of things that belong to someone else. So it's how you manage what you have and what you're able to do with what you've got. So that's a responsibility that God has put on us.
Yeah. And we also say that, we're taking care of them, but only for a while. We're giving them for a while, for a season of time. We know not how long sometimes. But that our stewardship is our love that comes from our love from God, our love for God, but we desire others to experience that love. And so our stewardship of what God's given us can do that very thing where we get to be good givers and allow him to be seen by others, which is exciting.
We always try and think about misconceptions or bad practices that oftentimes as we bring up these spiritual practices, they can be misunderstood or misused, especially as we deal with children, as we're introducing them to kids and their adults. Any misconceptions that you're aware of in terms of this idea of stewardship, this spiritual practice, Asia?
Sure. I think it's easy for us as adults to sometimes get trapped in the mindset of hoarding or having more than we could use. And this is something that I share with friends a lot because we take special care to keep things a certain way. And so we've been blessed, for instance, to have a car, and my son can't leave trash in it. If you get out of this car, you take your trash with you, right? We try to keep our home, pretty neat. And for me, if we can't keep things in order, it means we have more than we need. And I think sometimes our misconception is that more is better. And sometimes more is just more, right? And I also think sometimes the misconception is we worry about what happens after we give it. Right. So, yeah, there's this component of stewardship where we're taking in things and hoarding things. And now we have so much that we don't have space for it, or we don't know what to do with it, or we're abusing it. And then there's that other dynamic to it when you give things away that you wonder, well, I wonder what, for instance, I wonder what the church is going to do with that. Or I wonder who's, that thing. And I think that's a trap that we have.
Sense of control, right?
Yes, exactly.
I would add that to Asia, the worrying about where am I going to be at without that thing after I give it? Am I going to be okay without that hour I just donated, or without that, that money I just donated? What will happen? That, again, a control thing.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's huge, Gordon. I think that's huge.
So, and sometimes I think it is a misconception that stewardship always comes out of our abundance. I think sometimes, stewardship is everything. And so sometimes God is, it's interesting, as we go into our year-end campaign, I was praying about my own gift to Kids at Heart. And I came up with a figure in mind, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. And I would feel good about doing that. It was a little bit of a stretch. And then that day, I had an incredible financial downturn in almost exactly the same amount. And I thought, And I had to go back to say, God, did I mishear you? Or, how is this supposed to work out? But what was so exciting was over the next week to have him reveal how that was going to happen, which I had no idea about. And boy, that gave me great joy. That it's like, okay, God, if you worked out all these details, then things will be okay. You're going to work out my details, and I can proceed with this. But stewardship isn't always about that we can afford to give, or that we can afford to donate, because that's not truly stewardship. We can afford because God affords to us.
So to bring what you just said, Gordon, what I heard you say, Asia, you're saying stewardship is not something that is out of necessarily only happens when we have a lot of abundance. which is correct. You can give Jesus was talking about the widow who had just so little to give, yet she gave more than these other people who were making a big show about what they were giving. And so that's very true. And on the flip side, it also is a misconception to present in kids' minds that because you're a good steward, suddenly you'll have abundance.
Exactly.
The idea of giving to get.
Oh gosh, that's so important. That's so important.
Yeah, that's I would go as far as to say, not only is that not true, I couldn't even define that as stewardship, because that I would call that as a supernatural investment plan. You know, I will give $10 so that I get 12 back or get 20 back, and that's not at all. We aren't guaranteed any return on giving of our time or talents or money. But the point is, it's not mine. It's not mine to keep. It's mine to use as it gives God pleasure. It's and as He directs. And it's not me giving of my stuff or my time. It's me sharing what God has given me to give it back to Him in some way. You know, a book we recommend is wonderful book. Adam actually recommended it to me, but The Third Conversion by R. Scott Roden. And in it, why it's called Third Conversion, a wonderful quote from Martin Luther that said there are 3 conversions necessary: the conversion of the heart, the mind, and the purse. And this purse, in our case here, we're using that really to represent all of life, but it is that, you know, it's not only do I believe in Jesus, do I trust Him, do I love Him, but do I really give back to Him everything He has given me, which we've already mentioned is everything? Am I okay with that, or am I in my 40s? Am I just keeping it? Well, I'd love to ask both of you guys to share. So, where do we find this? Is this something we're just making up, or are there actual scriptures that would lead us to this idea that stewardship is a spiritual practice with a biblical foundation? Where do you like to look, Aja?
So, Gordon, I have a couple things written down here. One is 1 Peter 4:10, which is each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace.
And it nails it. That's pretty clear. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I think what 1 Peter also points to is there are lots of ways to serve others. And I think you've alluded to that by way of time, and we've talked about other resources, but I think that is stewardship.
Yeah, I mean, when it says whatever gift, and we've gotten a lot of different gifts. Some of us different gifts than others, but how can we use those?
Yeah.
Adam, what about you?
Well, I love reading the narratives of the Gospels and seeing how Jesus interacted with people and people interacted with Jesus. And I love the story where the little boy in the crowd who had just a little bit of food, he had what he needed, and perhaps it was a meal that was packed for him by his parents that day. Who knows? But he was the one who was willing to give what he had and share that. And Jesus was able to multiply that and use that to feed thousands of people.
Which, by the way, if that had gone wrong for him, he would have been without a lunch, wouldn't he? Yeah. But he did get taken care of, but we don't know if he ended up with 10 loaves and 4 fish, or if he just got 1 fish, but he got taken care of him. It wasn't the point of the story. The point of the story was that the crowd was taken care of and saw God's miraculous power and love. So,
yeah, and I think this picture of outstretched hands with handing over something, you know, whatever it is you have, and you're not holding on to it too tightly. You're willing to say, you can use this. This isn't mine to hold on to. It's mine to give. It's yours. Use it.
And in fact, maybe we need to hold everything and every gift with an open hand in the first place, so that when that need comes along, we aren't clasping it and having to let go of it to do that. You know, Aja, your jar idea in teaching your son about saving is part of stewardship. That's taking care of what we got, spending, saving, giving. And in our resource guide, we share Proverbs 30 verses 24 to 25, which I love. There are 4 things on earth that are small but unusually wise. Ants, they aren't strong, but they store up food all summer. And so I think kids are pretty enamored with ants worldwide. They know about these little workers, and yeah, they prepare for summer. And in the same way, that's part of that good stewardship. God wants us to preserve it. We shouldn't give all of our time and energy to the point of exhaustion of our souls. We should be wise, and but we should give, and we shouldn't give all of our money to where we can't pay our bills. We should save and prepare. But if we keep it with that open hand that we're just taking care of the gift, then we're on a good track.
I agree. My mother used to do this analogy when we were small. She would show us a fist and she'd say, you could keep it like this, and you could keep everything that's in here inside of it, but nothing else comes into it either. And I think that stewardship and generosity by its nature is that example. You don't give expecting, but for certain, if you keep your fist balled up, nothing's going to come into it either.
And it's exhausting.
Absolutely exhausting.
Holding on.
Well, that is a great example. Thanks for sharing that with us, that illustration. It's a great word picture. Nothing else can come in. What would you say, Asia, to leaders then about what are the benefits here for teaching the spiritual practice to children?
I think when we look at teaching that practice to children, the spiritual practice to children, I think what we have to realize is that we are creating stewards for the next generation. And hopefully what we teach in terms of stewardship outlives us. And if we want that, we have to teach this practice to children. Otherwise, what happens to the next generation? How then will they learn except we teach them?
You know, for a long time as a children's pastor, I would proclaim what I think is still a real truth here. We, in children's ministry, bemoan the fact that a lot of adults sit in the pew and do nothing. But maybe we're the ones to blame, because a lot of children's ministry does everything for the children. So what if from nursery up, children are expected to be stewards? They're expected to participate. They're expected to, be contributors, to not just be recipients. But we give them everything. We teach them. We provide for them. We do the things. They're passive learners in so many ways. And then they become adults and sit in the pew, and we say, okay, now we need you to volunteer for something. And it's like, well, I haven't done that for 30 years. Why would I start now? So it is, being a steward needs to be a practice of the whole body of Christ, where I have this, I can use it for him, for you, for the body.
I think that's an important point, Gordon, and I like to think of it in terms of teaching this material to children. I like to think of it in terms of what we reward versus what we expect. And I think if we, are just rewarding them just because, or, we see them do something good and there's a reward attached to it, that's not necessarily teaching them stewardship. I think we should expect them, as we discussed before, to live with an open hand. And we have to show them that. We have to model that, and we have to teach that.
In the classroom, we don't often differentiate in Christian education, but in secular education, we would differentiate between discipline and procedures. And procedures are just what's expected. When we come into the room, we do this. A procedure for you would be when we get out of the car, our trash goes with us. No, I'm not going to reward you for that. That is just how we do it. That is expected. And so, and it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just how the world works better. So we get money, we put it into 3 jars, not 1. We don't spend it all. And this becomes a habit. And in fact, with a lot of the spiritual practices, one of our board members, she didn't create the term, but she always reminds us that they are holy habits. that we make a habit of sharing what is ours. We make a habit of, that could be whatever your holiday is coming up. We mentioned that Thanksgiving Day is coming up. Make it a habit to invite somebody to the meal. Make it a habit to share your toys at the end of the year with someone that doesn't have as much. And I think that's honoring to God. It's not a rule. It's a procedure. It is a norm of life.
I agree. It should be as habitual as brushing your teeth before you go to bed at night. We teach them that. We should teach them this as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You use the word habitual there, and our resource guide says, what a privilege to help children habitually ask, what do you want me to do with this, God?
I love that. I read that and I love that question. It literally stopped me in my tracks. Not just in terms of teaching it to my child, but in terms of what I think about it for me, which I will then in turn teach to my child. But just the question, that question stopped me in my tracks. It really.
Yep.
And making it a habit up front. It's like, yes, when we're surprised at this wonderful new gift we got, oh, okay, why did I get it? What do you want me to do with it, God? Well, so how can we approach our children with an invitation to know the joy, that they too could know this joy of the spiritual practice of giving back to God? How can we get that to our kids and explain it to them?
My son is young, but he's a very keen sense of justice and fairness. I don't know where he gets it.
Yeah.
But
he might turn out to be like a lawyer or something.
I don't know. He's like masterful. He's like, if he sees like something happening and he's like, no, that's not right. That doesn't make sense. And for my son, he would call me on it. Right. So if I had him doing this jar and he didn't see the equivalent of that somewhere else in my life, it would not work for him. And so I think it's about what we model.
Yeah. Well, and God bless you, Asia, because so many of us as adults try to keep everything hidden from our children. And Deuteronomy 6, the whole point of Deuteronomy 6 is living out your love for Jesus. The struggles, the good, the bad, the learning, the growing, so that they see you growing, but also, that they see you growing and they see what your goal is in a way that they learn about it. And yeah, they're going to call us out, but why do that good thing behind the scenes? Why give to your church and never tell your kids about it? We don't make a show of it, but we want them to know, well, yes, this is a normal part that mom and dad do. This is what we do because it makes us happy to be a part of that. Or this is, doing something like a compassion child together as a family can be extremely helpful.
I like the idea in the resource guide too, just talking about pictures of, it says pictures of hard things, hard to share things, things that are hard to share. Like just having this conversation with kids, and I would take it even a step further, having a conversation with kids about things that are hard for me to share.
Yeah.
And then let them know that as I recognize what are these things that are hard for me to share, that I need to bring that to God and just ask God that question. Why is this hard for me to share, God? What do you want to show me about why I'm holding on too tightly to this? But to invite kids into that and just make it a real open thing where it's not like you're trying to lead them to something that they're, you're trying to force something out of them, but to just lead them into this idea of when you recognize something that is hard to share, that you take that to God, that you ask God that question, why? Can you show me, help me understand? Can you help me release this?
I think, I'm sorry, Adam, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I love what you said because I think it's honest, right? And I think sometimes when it comes to teaching our kids and raising our kids, we're not as forthcoming as we should be about the things that we struggle with. I struggled to give my offering this week, and here's why. And this is how I approached God about that, and this is what I said. And that too then becomes a habit for them, right? When they have trouble with stewardship, or when they have trouble being generous, or when they have trouble giving, they will come to understand, okay, this isn't something that I have to hide or be dishonest about. Mom had this same struggle, and this is what she said to God when it happened.
And when we ask God, what's going on? Why is this a struggle? I think that takes us and our kids to a much deeper level. You know, I think that's why Martin Luther said that's the third conversion, because, you know, the purse, the money strings, or I would add to that for me, time. Those are two cherished things, what I own and my time. And when I can't release it, it's probably tugging at something deeper. What is it that I'm trying to control or trying to keep track of? And what are you inviting me to do with that? But yeah, the more we can put that into a relational context, the more that the kids can see the joy and the meaning of surrounding our sharing, our stewardship, our giving, the more they get it, what is actually something else.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Asia, for joining us with this conversation. There was a moment there where I thought I saw your son's little hand on your arm, and I thought, oh, we're going to get to see him. But so we know that
I have no idea what we said for those couple minutes, because I was just having great joy watching a little 5-year-old hand creep into the screen. So.
Yeah. So, but thanks for sharing your time with us. We want everyone to know who's watching this or listening that we're not just doing these conversations in a bubble. We actually have resources attached to these. We keep talking about our resource guides. We'd encourage people to know that you can go to our website, kidsathome.org. That's kids with a Z, kidsathome.org, and you can download the resource guide from this conversation. And it has practical ideas on the backside that are age appropriate, level appropriate for you to try and invite your children into this spiritual practice of stewardship. We also encourage folks to find their way on Facebook to our Transforming Kids Ministry Facebook group. And we'd love for you, if you have the opportunity, to share any videos or stories or just little testimonies of how you're watching your children open up to God in this way of giving. We'd love to see.
Questions are okay too, if you have them for the community there.
Absolutely. We just would encourage you to just explore, have fun exploring around our website and on Facebook, all the resources that are available. We also have a new Kids on Mission resource that we've just began to roll out, and we're excited about that as well. You can find that. We're trying to, and this ties in, Gordon, don't you think, with this conversation about stewardship? The whole point of Kids on Mission is loving your neighbor as yourself. It's the idea of saying, you know, wherever you are, whatever the context is in which you're living, whatever your neighborhood looks like, you have opportunities right now today to be on mission, to live missionally, to relationally reach out to those around you. And one of the best ways you can do that is by asking God, what do you want me to do? Look out your window. What do you want me to do, God, in my neighborhood? And say yes to whatever God shows you.
Yeah, it might be giving something, it might be serving, it might be just reaching out in friendship. So.
And that's all stewardship.
All stewardship. Well, we'd love to close our times asking God to use this to do a transformational work in us and our children as we enjoy His presence through this practice, as we learn the practice. And so, Asia, would you bless us with a closing, a benediction of some sort?
Sure.
We would love that.
Gracious God, you've called us to be servants and stewards. You've called us to open hands and open hearts. Help us to use wisely what is yours that you've loaned to us, and help us to share, to be generous, to take good care of the gifts with which you've entrusted us, oh God. And we thank you, Father, for the opportunity to teach and the opportunity to share these principles with children. And particularly, we thank you for these resources that you've created for us to use for that purpose. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks, Asia. Just in the same way, we wouldn't want to rush through a Thanksgiving feast and push away from the table and go on the rest of our day without really just enjoying what we were able to eat and enjoying the company. Let's just invite our listeners now to spend some time, just some quiet time with God, not rushing on to the very next thing. Just listen to God and ask God how God would have you use what you're learning today about the spiritual practice of stewardship, and just sit with God and see what he wants to show you. And we'll just have some quiet music for a couple minutes, and then God bless you and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Asia, so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Asia. Thank you, Adam. And God bless all of you.
Thank you. Take good care.
Bye.